concept of totalitarianism was first popularized by Benito Mussolini in describing the nature of his own regime. The term has since been applied to virtually every regime characterized by tyrannical rule, domestic power without limit or accountability, and suppression of any and all forms of political dissent. These types of regimes have more often than not resulted in widespread political corruption, squandering of resources, bloody warfare, and of course, genocide. But just what is it that leads to such calamity? How do these types of power structures form in the first place? The cold, hard reality is that every totalitarian system throughout history, from the Christian dominions and Islamic caliphate of the Middle Ages to the fascist and communist regimes of the 20th century, achieved their power and influence through the consent of the masses. The primary means of achieving such support involves selling an idea, a philosophy that promises to solve every problem that the people face. Of course, none of these ideas hold up against any honest scrutiny, so their proponents instead resort to a number of brazenly dishonest tactics which manipulate emotional vulnerabilities, deceive the public, and stifle debate. In this series, I will be outlining these tactics as well as explaining how they are all inherently self-invalidating of those who employ them. The first of these telltale totalitarian tactics is one that we here on YouTube are all too familiar with: censorship. Instances of creationist trolls such as the Discovery Institute attempting to get pro-evolution videos removed from YouTube are but the latest example of the greater Christian effort towards censorship with regards to dissenting arguments. Users who defend evolution against creationist disinformation such as Thunderfoot, Superfly NB, CDK007, and countless others have at one time or another been vote-botted, false-flagged, and/or false DMCA'd by those who are too afraid to confront them in the open debate. This approach, frequently taken by Christians, is in no way unique to YouTube, nor is it by any means a recent phenomenon. For nearly a century now, creationists in the United States have been trying everything they can think of to stop evolution from being taught in public schools with any degree of coherence. Even the efforts against evolution in general are far from the first time Christians have used such an approach in dealing with scientific discoveries that contradict their scripture. A name that immediately comes to mind from before the time of Darwin is Galileo Galilei. Although Galileo's proposals had already been made by Copernicus nearly a century earlier, this did not stop the idea of the Earth revolving around the Sun as opposed to the other way around from provoking the ire of the Catholic Inquisition. He was brought to trial on charges of heresy due to the fact that his publication entitled Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems contradicted Psalms 93:1 and 96:10, both of which contend that the Earth does not move. Galileo's trial ended in a guilty verdict, and he would spend the remainder of his life under house arrest. The Catholic Church would not lift its subsequent ban on books supporting the notion of heliocentrism until 1758. The crime of questioning sacred dogma has always carried a stiff punishment whenever and wherever Christians have had the means of enforcing laws against it. In today's day and age, however, their ability to enforce any such policies in day-to-day life has all but completely vanished. Hence, we find them on YouTube, an internet website where they can punish heretics with channel suspensions, anything to stop people from tarnishing the credibility of their so-called self-evident divine truth. Apparently, it's only self-evident when it's the only thing being said. Christian fundamentalists, however, are far from the only ones on this site who see no problem in holding this sentiment. One of the more famous instances of Muslim censorship on YouTube in recent memory was Phil Helene's video What Islam Fears Laughter being hit with a rather disingenuous privacy complaint. Practically anyone who specializes in criticizing Islam on YouTube inevitably deals with Muslims trying to shut them up sooner or later. You see this happening all over the internet. For example, there are entire groups on Facebook dedicated exclusively to the deletion of other groups which are critical of Islam. One particularly revealing case involves a group entitled There's a Group on Facebook called Fuck Islam, Help Me to Delete It. This is a group with over 200,000 members with the sole objective of censoring a group with just over 6,500. Fortunately, Fuck Islam is still currently active. This type of total disregard for free speech on the part of Muslims on the internet is of no surprise considering the general attitude towards criticism of Islam held by Muslims in everyday life. While the Christian means of suppressing dissent has for the most part changed with the times, the Muslim means of keeping people quiet has continued to maintain a decidedly physical character. Such was made abundantly clear by the reaction of many Muslims as well as Islamic governments across the globe to cartoon portrayals of the Prophet Muhammad posted in the Danish Jyllands-Posten newspaper. Images of Muslims holding picket signs featuring menacing slogans while shouting threats of divine wrath seemed all too reminiscent of the 1989 reaction to the publication of Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses. For the simple crime of writing a book, Rushdie was issued a fatwa by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a mark of death which he will carry for the rest of his life. The practice of punishing anyone, Muslim or not, who dares blaspheme against any tenet of Islamic dogma has been standard practice in Islamic society ever since the days of Prophet Muhammad himself. Even to this day, to leave the fold of Islam or to even suggest that the Quran, Muhammad, or Allah are anything less than perfect are considered offenses punishable by death. Given the increased world attention toward the savage brutality of Islam in recent years, however, Muslim governments from across the planet have seen fit to work together at ensuring that no other society allow Islam to be undermined either. At the 2009 Durban Review Conference, the Pakistani government, along with many other Muslim countries, proposed a resolution to criminalize the defamation of religions. Had it passed, the concept could have easily been used to legitimize religious blasphemy laws already in place, as well as force secular governments to import laws of that nature. Luckily, this proposal was decided against. So just why do Muslims go to such lengths to silence critics? If you ask them, they will say that they find criticism to be offensive or sometimes even damaging. If you ask them if they're proud of their religion, however, their answer will most likely be yes. Both cannot be true. If you have a religious belief that you truly believe is perfect in every way, then theoretically it shouldn't matter to you what a critic says. You don't have anything to hide, do you? The same cannot be said for the People's Republic of China. You could say the Chinese government pulled the biggest false flag in YouTube history when they blocked the entire site from their national server. Their initial reason for doing so was to stop images of Tibetan protesters being beaten into the ground by Chinese government officials before the 2008 Summer Olympics, which were about to be held in Beijing. However, YouTube continues to be blocked from mainland China along with an ever-growing list of other sites. It goes without saying that this type of utterly flagrant restriction of information and activity critical of the government is the norm in China and has been for quite some time. Being a communist regime, the People's Republic of China shares its embracement of censorship with its ideological forerunner, the Soviet Union. Under Joseph Stalin, political censorship in the Soviet Union grew so out of proportion that Stalin quite literally gained the power to make people disappear. Every regime to fully embrace the principles of Marx, Trotsky, and Lenin since then has reached the same level of intrusiveness. From China to Venezuela to North Korea and Vietnam, communist regimes have consistently refused to acknowledge the importance of the accountability inherent in free speech. A similar trend can be found among communism's famous useful idiots right here on YouTube. This type of pro-censorship rhetoric, however, tends to be more focused upon hate speech.
Well, he basically posted a mirror of the Cassidil suspension video that you may or may not have seen already. Yeah, and I'm just going to read you some of the... I'm just going to read you the comment exchange that I had with Derek on this video. And basically, I at first wrote, "She not just had it coming, she deserved it." That was my first comment. And the reason why I'm saying this, she had it coming and she deserved it because she practiced hate speech on YouTube.
Really, Red? Don't you think it might be more effective to just have everyone gang-pwn her? So what if it's hate speech? That doesn't make it any less the duty of those of us with opposing viewpoints to demonstrate why she's wrong. The concept of hate speech is, at its very basis, an ad hominem attack. All it does is attack the person instead of the idea. The textbook definition of shooting the messenger. When you attempt to silence people who make racist, homophobic, and outright bigoted statements in a political context, not only do you show them the very fear they're looking for, but you also motivate them to make a greater effort towards subtlety.
There is a political party in the United Kingdom called the BNP, the British National Party. Many people say that that party is an extreme right-wing group which expresses hate.
No, it doesn't actually. I'm going to disagree with you then. It's actually very clever in not expressing hate. In fact, it cloaks its language very, very carefully to make sure that it doesn't express hate, because if it did, it wouldn't be allowed to be a political party in this country.
The British National Party, despite being nothing short of a David Duke-style white nationalist party, has recently come to enjoy the success of electing 2 of its members to the European Parliament. While there have been multiple factors that have led to this, many having to do with the Labour Party, there is one that strikes as rather ironic. In the United States, there is virtually no limit to what a person can say short of literally yelling fire in a crowded theater. Cities will even use taxpayer money to provide police protection to groups like the Ku Klux Klan and Aryan Nations as they spew forth their bigoted bile. This is so they can enjoy their First Amendment right without having to worry about being ripped to pieces by angry counter-protesters, and to ensure that the situation does not degenerate into a riot. In Britain, and in Europe in general, groups in the same vein have no such luxury and are thus forced to tone down their rhetoric. This leads to groups such as the BNP effectively mainstreaming what is otherwise limited to the fringes of the political spectrum. While we in the States have plenty of our own such groups and figures who attempt to sugarcoat their hate, all it takes is one look to the nearest Klan rally for a clear demonstration of why they are full of shit. With such ridiculous portrayals of their political position hidden by censorship, the BNP is granted a considerably easier task in misleading the public. What's even more ironic is that this is far from the first time censorship has proven beneficial to a racially charged fascist party. When Adolf Hitler was released from prison in 1924, he was banned from making public speeches in all but 4 of the 17 German states. At the time, not only had Hitler's party degenerated into a critically fractured shell of its former self, but given the relatively tranquil and prosperous atmosphere of mid-1920s Germany, Hitler's public speeches would not have been well received. His being banned from public speaking forced Hitler to spend the next few years strengthening his party's internal stability. By the time all hell broke loose once again with the crash of '29, the Nazis were ready to pounce. Once achieving power, Hitler, not surprisingly, practiced censorship himself. The truth of the matter is, censoring any public opinion, regardless of how offensive it may be, is never legitimate. If your idea requires the absence of dissenting arguments to gain acceptance, then your idea cannot possibly be anything other than flawed. This is why in censoring hate speech, one only gives the impression that those with a more level-headed view of the world have something to hide. Instead of censoring those we disagree with, we should instead address them and demonstrate why they're wrong instead of cowering in fear. Ideas which can stand up against criticism have merit, but ideas which must be enforced are totalitarian and, dare I say, religious. In addressing a neo-Nazi myself, I would begin with that famous Voltaire quote, "I do not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it."
If that makes me a fascist, then Heil bloody Hitler!